Chapter 5. After lunch, Gwen stood. "All right, then," she said. "Everyone interested in some wand work, follow me." Almost all of the first-year students rose and followed her out into the courtyard. Marcy had shown Holly how to carry her wand safely to lunch, in a pocket, point down. Holly carefully pulled out her wand and followed the rest. Gwen had all the students line up in a row and sat them down on the grass. Then she handed each of them a match. "Now," she began, "close your eyes and clear your brain of everything. You are supposed to be turning this match into a needle. Think of the shape of a needle. Do you have it fixed in your mind? Good. Open your eyes, stare at the match, and think about that needle. When you are ready, flick your wand like this." She gave her wand a twisting motion, and the match in front of her reformed into a needle. Soon everyone was flicking their wands, but not with much luck. Gwen walked behind them, adjusting wand positions and flicking motions. "Look, I did it," said Mark excitedly, and sure enough his match had turned silvery and pointed. "Good job," said Gwen approvingly. She handed Mark another match. "Now, do it again. You haven't mastered a spell unless you can repeat it time and time again with the same results." So Mark tried again. This time the match turned silver, but still looked like a match. By the end of the lesson, everyone, even Holly, had managed to get at least some color to their match, except Becky. She flicked and flicked and flicked to no results. While everyone else was congratulating himself or herself for noticeable improvement, Becky sat silently with tears streaming down her face. Gwen reached down and took the wand from Becky's trembling hands. She frowned and handed it back to her. "Give it a swish," she instructed. Becky obediently gave it a wide swish. Immediately, the matches lying in front of the students, matches that had not turned into needles, exploded into fire with a loud boom. Everyone jumped at the sound. Almost simultaneously, a second explosion came from Mickey's bag that had been lying next to him, as several exploding snaps within went off unexpectedly, causing the bag to fly into the air and setting it on fire. Mickey and the other students scrambled to put out the fire, while Gwen examined the wand again, frowning. She held it gingerly and gave it an experimental shake, frowning even more. "This isn't right," she murmured, puzzled. "Where did you get this wand?" "She got it from a street vendor," piped up Mark. "I told her she needs to get one from Ollivander's if she wants her wand to work right." "We didn't know about Ollivander's," wailed Becky. "The man said we'd never find as good a wand for such a low price. I'll ask my father. Tell him to go back to Diagon Alley and get me an Ollivander wand. It can get here by Monday or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday at the latest." "That won't work," said Gwen. "Ollivander wands match the person waving it. You, not your father, must actually hold the wands and wave them to find the right wand." "That's what I told her," said Mark. "She'll have to wait until the holidays to get a new wand." "I'll flunk all my classes if I have to wait until then," sobbed Becky. "What'll I do?" "Let me take this wand to Professor Iverson," said Gwen. "Maybe we can think of something." With that, the group broke up. Holly joined the others, going back to the dorms. She still had a lot of homework to catch up on. She also had a letter to write, if she had time. Becky curled up on a sofa next to Holly in the common room and cried quietly. Class had barely begun, and already she was sure she'd fail. Later on, Gwen returned from her talk with Professor Iverson. "Well, it's not as bad as it could be," she began. "Professor Iverson agrees that you should not be using this wand for class. The only place for a replacement is Ollivander's, but, as I said before, he does not do owl orders. I've gotten permission for you to travel to London to get a new one." Becky perked up considerably at that. "But," continued Gwen, "permission from Professor Iverson does not get you to London. You may go only if you are accompanied by one of the Hogwarts staff, and you must get there and back without missing any of your classes." "How is that possible?" asked Mark. "The train isn't running, and you can't apparate in or out of Hogwarts. Brooms would take way too long, and she'd never get there and back in time, even if Becky knew how to fly one." "Not to mention finding a teacher to escort her to and from London," said Marcy. By now everyone had heard Becky crying and knew her problem. "One thing at a time," said Ben. "We've got permission. Now we have to find a teacher and a way. Hagrid, piped up Holly suddenly. Everyone looked at her surprised. Huh? Professor Hagrid, repeated Holly. He's got a motorbike with a sidecar. He does? How do you know? After all, Holly was a first-year student who had barely arrived. That's how I got to Hogwarts, Holly explained. We left Friday night and arrived early this morning. You could leave one night, arrive in London in the morning, buy your wand, and be back that same evening. That would work, said Gwyn thoughtfully. You think he'd do it? I don't know, replied Holly, but you can always ask. You'll have to ask, said Ben, looking over at Becky. Oh, no, I couldn't ask him, said Becky in a panic. He's too big, too scary. Could you? She looked hopefully over at Gwyn and Ben. Can't, they replied. We've got a prefect meeting tonight. Besides, continued Gwyn, it has to be you. It's your wand and your problem. You have to fix it. We got you the permission. The rest is up to you. You'd be way more convincing than either of us. Becky turned to Holly in a panic. Would you come with me? She asked. You know him and about the motorcycle. Holly thought about it. Sure, she replied. But I don't really know how to get to his house. Becky does, put in Mark. It's through that gate next to herbology, he reminded Becky. You were asking about it, remember? Becky reluctantly nodded. So Holly found herself following Becky down the stairs, through the huge doors, and down the path to Hagrid's hut. Along the way, Becky described her first sight of Hagrid towering over the rest when they got off the train. He was so huge and fierce that I would have gotten right back on the train if there hadn't been so many other people behind me that I could only move forward. And then he got us into these tiny boats that glided ever so silently across this huge black lake and into a creepy dark tunnel that went under Hogwarts. It was ever so scary. That would be scary, agreed Holly. Then she thought back to her own experience with Hagrid and the fat braids sticking out. But I think he's nice, she added. Hagrid apparently lived in a small hut on the edge of the forest. It looked vaguely familiar to Holly the closer they got to it. She recognized the small shed next to the hut as the one she had come out of that very morning after their trip from London. A small tendril of smoke trailed out of the chimney. Becky and Holly walked up to the front door of the hut. Becky took one look at some huge muddy boots placed outside next to a quiver of arrows and a large crossbow and froze. I can't, she whispered, trembling. Oh, for goodness sakes, thought Holly. She stepped forward and boldly knocked on the door. Immediately a deep, loud barking sounded from within the hut. Just a minute, called out a voice. Back, Fang, back! The door opened and Hagrid stepped into view. Hagrid seemed much more scary than Holly remembered. Twice as tall as either of them, Hagrid had dark, shaggy hair and beard, and he was wearing tangled, furry clothes. Hagrid's face was stern, and he looked much more an animal than a person. Then his face broke out into a broad smile. Well, hello there, Holly, he said warmly. I didn't expect to see you so soon. What brings you here? Is everything okay? Just fine, sir, replied Holly. This is my friend Becky, she continued, turning to Becky, who was visibly trembling and hiding a bit behind Holly. She has a favor to ask you. Well, come on in and tell me about it. Hagrid backed up and gestured the two girls to come in. Holly walked cautiously in with Becky following fearfully behind. The room was dark, lit only by the fire in the hearth. Have a seat, he invited, pulling a stack of books off a big chair. Both Holly and Becky fit together in the chair easily. A huge gray dog had been hovering behind Hagrid. The dog bounced forward, jumping on the girls and licking them eagerly. Down, Fang, down, commanded Hagrid, pulling the dog off them. Don't mind him, he said. Fang is more bark than bite. He doesn't get much company. Would you like some tea? Hagrid inquired, pulling out a huge pot. Yes, please, replied Holly, wiping dog slobber off her face. So, began Hagrid, Becky, is it? Becky nodded. Tell me what your problem is. It's my wand, blurted Becky, and she launched into the whole story of where they had gotten the wand and how it wouldn't work right. That's a right sorry story, Becky, said Hagrid as he handed the girls each a huge mug full of hot water flavored, presumably, with tea. but it looked and smelled suspiciously more like mud. "But what's it got to do with me?" he asked, sitting down with his own mug. "Well," continued Becky, "Professor Iverson said I could go to London to get a new wand if I were escorted by somebody from Hogwarts, and if I could be back so as I didn't miss any school. And, Holly was telling us how you got her to Hogwarts in a single night by motorbike, and I was wondering—" Becky paused to collect her courage. "I was wondering if you could maybe take me to London and get a new wand?" The last words came out in a rush. Hagrid put his mug down on the table and sat back. "Well, that's a pretty tall request you have there," he said thoughtfully. "I'll have to do some checking. I'm not supposed to ride the bike much myself, but if you need a new wand that bad, we might be able to work something out." Becky jumped out of the chair excitedly. "Oh, thank you," she gushed. "Mind ya, I can't make no promises, though," said Hagrid gruffly. "I'll let you know when I know something." "Thank you so much," said Becky again, and the two left Hagrid's hut. Becky fairly flew up the pathway back to the dorms in her excitement. Holly had to run to keep up with her. Holly saw her first ghosts that evening at dinner. She had just put down a bowl of milk for her kitten, as yet unnamed, when this white transparent shape fairly shot out of the table in front of her. Holly would have been very scared, except by this time she'd come to learn the unexpected was normal around Hogwarts. The shape materialized into a very fat person dressed in monk's clothing. He had a round, jolly face and looked right at Holly. "So, are you the new Hufflepuff student?" he asked. Yes," Holly replied. "Who are you?" "I'm the Friar," he announced. "I'm the Hufflepuff House Ghost. Welcome." "Thank you," said Holly. The Friar drifted off, and as Holly watched him leave, she saw other pearly white shapes materializing and floating around the hall, mingling with other students. No one seemed scared at all. "I heard most of the ghosts are harmless," commented Mark beside her, "but we've got to watch out for Peeves, the poltergeist. He likes to play tricks on everyone." "Oh," said Holly, and then added to herself, "What's a poltergeist?" but decided to not ask. She would probably find out soon enough. Hagrid showed up as the group was finishing their dessert. He looked over at the Hufflepuff table, spotted Becky sitting next to Holly, and made his way over. "You're all set," he said jubilantly. "We leave tonight right after dark. Sorry about the short notice, but the moon'll be too high next week to go." "Tonight," began Becky, "but—" "She'll be there," cut in Mark quickly. "What time and where?" "My place," answered Hagrid happily. 8 o'clock. Gotta go get ready." Hagrid walked out of the hall as quickly as he had arrived. "What'd you say I'd be there for?" cried Becky to Mark in a panic. "I can't go tonight. Father hasn't sent me the money yet." "You heard him. The moon'll be too high later," said Mark. "If you don't go now, it'll be a whole month before you get another chance." Mark leaned over and talked to the rest of the students at the table. "Hey, everyone. Becky is going to London tonight. Do you think we can scrounge up enough money for a wand?" There were several nods of assent. "We can probably pull it off if we work together," assured Gwen. "Oh, thank you," said Becky gratefully. "I'll pay you all back as soon as my father sends the money." Everyone left the table to go back to the dorms in search of wand money. Everyone, that is, except Holly. She had an appointment with Madame Pomfrey. Marcy pointed out the infirmary to Holly on the way back from breakfast. Given her many trips to and from the dorms, Holly felt reasonably certain she could navigate there and back on her own, but she would have preferred company. Madame Pomfrey was waiting for Holly in the infirmary. Come in," she encouraged when Holly arrived. "Have a seat. How are you feeling?" she asked after Holly sat down. Fine, I guess," replied Holly. "Are they your feelings or someone else's?" Holly thought about that. Sure, she was sad about Becky and her wand problems, and happy when they appeared to be solved. But were they her feelings or Becky's feelings? "I don't really know," replied Holly honestly. "That's what we have to work on," said Madame Pomfrey. "Before you can block out other people's feelings, you have to be able to tell which feelings are which. Now, close your eyes." Holly closed them. "Look into yourself. Think about how you feel." Holly was silent, thinking about her feelings. "Ow!" she said suddenly, rubbing her thumb. "You poked me." Holly opened her eyes. but it wasn't her thumb that had been poked. Madame Pomfrey held the pin over her own thumb. See what I mean? Get to know when it is you that hurts, or someone else. Did you bring your kitten? Holly nodded and brought her kitten out of her pocket. Good. Let's try again. Only this time, I want you to put your kitten on your lap. Holly did. Close your eyes again. Can you hear her purr? Yes, said Holly, stroking the kitten. Now focus on that purr. Hear it. Feel it. Let nothing exist for you but that purr. Holly did. Now, how does your thumb feel? Holly thought. It feels different. Like it is there, but distant, sort of. Good, said Madame Pomfrey. Your kitten is surrounding you with all sorts of happy feelings, and they are blocking feelings that are further away. Really? Holly looked down with pleasure at her kitten. Keep your kitten with you at all times, even during class. I'll send a note to the other teachers telling them that the cat is part of your healing treatment, instructed Madame Pomfrey. And when you feel overwhelmed with emotions, focus on your kitten, and she'll help you separate them out. Let's try again. Close your eyes and focus on your kitten. Holly closed her eyes and stroked her kitten. Can you feel this? Madame Pomfrey asked. Yes, said Holly with a smile. It's on your shoulder, but it's all distant. And now? Yes, that was on your leg. The kitten made everything bearable. And how about now? Hey, that hurt, said Holly, opening her eyes in surprise and rubbing her arm. It should have, said Madame Pomfrey. That was you I poked, not me. Learn to tell the difference. Most of the students at Hogwarts are pretty healthy, but they all have feelings. Your homework this week is to try to recognize your feelings from others. Once you identify feelings that are not your own, try and determine whose they are. Come back Monday after dinner and we'll see how you're doing. Holly left the hospital feeling loads better. For the first time, she felt she could actually do something to untangle the emotions within. She got back to the dorms just as Becky, Mark, and Ben were leaving to meet Hagrid. Wait for me, shouted Holly. She ran to her bed and returned with a heavy sweater that she had gotten from Mrs. Potter. Take this, Holly insisted. It gets cold along the way. Becky took the sweater gratefully. Holly joined the group and they went downstairs. Together the Hufflepuffs had gathered 10 gold galleons, 8 galleons and 58 newts and 32 sickles. Mark, who had just gotten his wand this term, had assured Becky that it should be enough for a wand and a bit left over for meals. On the way down, Mark told Holly that he had come along just to see the motorcycle. I've never seen one operating before, he confided. Ben, their prefect, came along as an escort. Officially, students weren't allowed on the grounds after dark. This time we're all out with actual permission, continued Mark excitedly. When they got outside the castle, Ben held up his wand and said, Lumos. The wand tip immediately began to glow and give off a soft light. Everyone continued down the path. Lumos, thought Holly to herself. That's a useful spell. She waved her own wand and gave it a try. Lumos. Her wand gave a small spark and died. Holly continued to try to get her wand to light up, stopping only when they had reached Hagrid's hut. While Mark exclaimed excitedly over his first close-up look at a motorcycle, Holly found herself hugging a tearful Becky and whispering in her ear that everything would be all right and that she might actually have fun on the trip. All too soon, Hagrid lifted Becky into the chair and tucked her in. In a short time, the motorcycle revved up and the two took off. Wow, said Mark admiringly as they watched the motorcycle headlamp shrink in the distance. I didn't know motorcycles could fly. Holly looked at him and laughed. They can't, she replied. Then she looked up in the sky at the motorcycle, which was rapidly vanishing in the distance, and added, Not normally. Dear Mom and Dad, how are you? I am fine. I have arrived safely at Hogwarts. It was Sunday morning and Mark was sending a letter to his family, so Holly decided to write one to her parents too. Mark promised to take Holly along with him when he sent his letter and show Holly how to send hers. Hogwarts is a very large school. It has 142 staircases and no elevators. I am getting a lot of exercise. The food here is very good. Positively wonderful, to be more accurate. But Holly didn't know how to spell that. I start my classes on Monday. Most of the people I have met so far have been very nice. The Slytherins definitely did not fit into the nice category. A couple of Slytherin students, one wearing a prefect badge, had accosted them upon their return from Hagrid's. The main door had just closed when an accusatory voice shouted out, "Hey, Harris! What are you doing outside after hours?" The speaker, a tall, thin boy with sandy-colored hair and hazel eyes, wearing Slytherin colors, advanced, challenging Ben with his wand extended. "And a couple of first years, no less," he added disgustedly, looking over at Mark and Holly. "It's none of your business, Richards," retorted Ben, pointing his own wand at the prefect. "But it is," disagreed Richards, moving closer. "I'm a prefect now, and it looks to me like you are breaking the rules." Richards moved even closer. The two extended wands were practically touching. "We have permission to be out tonight." "Yeah, right. What for?" "That is Hufflepuff business, and definitely not yours," replied Ben, not backing down. The two faced off aggressively until a new voice broke the silence. "Oh, let them go, Tom." The speaker was a pale, slender girl with long, straight black hair. She moved forward and gently pulled down Tom's wand. She looked at the three with contempt. "They're Hufflepuffs, not Gryffindors. They probably do have permission. We have better things to do with our time." Tom let the girl lead him off. "We find you out again like this, and I will be reporting you," he threatened. The two moved out of the entryway and down another hall. Ben put away his wand with relief. "Becky did have permission to go," he confided, "but I am not sure that permission was meant for us or tonight. I'm glad we didn't have to find out for sure. Come along," he said to Holly and Mark. "We need to get going." "Guess what? I have a new pet. It's a beautiful kitten. I have always wanted one. She has long, silky gray fur, white paws, and a white chest. She's very friendly. I named her Sasha. She doesn't make me sneeze at all. I hope you don't mind. Today I'm going to watch the tryouts for some sport called Quidditch. It's supposed to be something like football." "Holly, are you ready?" Mark shouted. "Just a minute," replied Holly, looking over her letter one last time. "I miss you both a whole bunch. Please write. Love, Holly." Holly rolled up her letter and hurried to join Mark. On the way to the Owlery, Mark kept up a running chatter about Quidditch, his favorite sport. He knew quite a lot about it. His parents had gotten him the latest Quidditch Through the Ages book. It even had a chapter on Quidditch at Hogwarts. "Did you know," said Mark enthusiastically, "that Harry Potter played Quidditch?" Holly made a non-committal noises. Of course she didn't know that. She didn't even know what Quidditch was. "He was the youngest seeker ever playing at age 11, Mark continued. "First years aren't even supposed to own brooms, but Harry Potter was so good that they made an exception in his case. Can you imagine that? The book says he caught his first snitch with his mouth. I sure wish I could have seen that." "Me too," agreed Holly wholeheartedly. Then maybe she would see why everyone was all excited about Quidditch. Whatever was a snitch, anyway? Holly selected the nicest, friendliest-looking owl she could find in the owlery to use to send her letter. She wasn't sure how her parents would react to owl mail. She seriously doubted they would write back if it had to be by owl. She was sad about that. Quidditch tryouts were terribly exciting. Holly had never seen anyone actually fly around on a broomstick, let alone chase balls in the air. Mark tried to explain the rules while they watched, but Holly didn't really listen. She could feel the players' exhilaration as they swooped around, and it was as if she was flying too. She couldn't wait until she could watch a real game. Holly spent the rest of the day hanging around the Hufflepuff common room. She looked over her books getting ready for class. She chatted with the people in the portraits. Some of them were quite interesting, telling jokes and stories, and others just wanted to be left alone. The Hufflepuff library had all sorts of strange books. Some screeched and screamed just by pulling them out. Others talked to her when opened. Also inside the Hufflepuff library was a huge championship cup. Holly read the inscription curiously. It said, "Triwizard Cup." Engraved beneath was the name Cedric Diggory. The cup was beautiful, shiny silver with all sorts of raised flowers on it. In front of the cup was a rosebud-shaped candle holder containing a single flame that burned brightly. Above the cup was a photo. It was a wizard photo showing a young man waving happily and then turning to walk behind a hedge. "He looks handsome, doesn't he?" said Susan Braesbury. She was carrying a picture book titled Common Insects of Great Britain that she had found in the house library. Holly nodded. "It was my Mum's first year at Hogwarts when they held the Tri-Wizard Cup," continued Susan, tucking the insect book under her arm. "I found Diggory badges amongst Mum's Hogwarts stuff. Mum said he was so nice, so handsome and brave. She was very proud when he was selected as Hogwarts Tri-Wizard champion. He was the best of the best." "What happened?" "He died," Susan said simply. "He had barely won the cup when he died." "How?" asked Holly curiously. "They say you know who did it," answered Susan. "You know who? But why?" "Because he was there," answered Susan. "Because he was in the way." Holly shivered. Hearing about you-know-who was one thing. Seeing one of his victims up close was sobering. She looked at the picture of the smiling Cedric. To have been killed for no reason at all, that was really awful. Becky hadn't arrived by dinner time. She wasn't back by the time Holly pulled up her covers to sleep that night. Holly was a bit worried, but she was sure Hagrid would get Becky back in time for class the next day. The last thing Holly remembered was the loud, calming purr of her kitten curled up near her head as she fell fast asleep. "Holly! Holly, wake up!" Holly felt someone shake her shoulder urgently. She stirred and tried to snuggle back under her covers. "Holly, oh, do wake up! I'm back!" Holly opened her eyes and saw a blurry pair of brown eyes staring intently into hers. "Oh, good, you're awake," said the face that went with the eyes. Blearily, Holly realized it was Becky shaking her awake. "Becky," she said, half awake, "you're back." "That's what I've been telling you," said Becky impatiently. "I'm back, and look at—" She waved a new wand excitedly in front of her. "Ashen unicorn hair. Isn't it beautiful?" Holly rubbed the sleep out of her eyes. Yes, I guess." Becky gave her new wand a flourish and danced around the room. In response, the wand gave off a gentle stream of sparks. "It's just wonderful," she gushed. "Oh, I just knew that other wand wasn't right. I never realized how not right. Mr. Ollivander took one look at the wand I was carrying and practically grabbed it out of my hand. He kept on muttering Bellatrix, or something like that, and definitely agreed it was no wand for a student. And then we found this one, and I owe it all to you." She wrapped Holly into the biggest, warmest hug Holly had ever had, except from her parents. "You're the best friend ever. Thank you so much." Becky glanced over to her bed. "Oh, I've brought you a present." She pulled off a small box that had been lying there and handed it to Holly. Holly opened it. Inside was a small silver bracelet with a single charm dangling. "It's a charm bracelet," explained Becky, "for good luck. You put charms on it that mean something to you. I've got you your first charm." Holly examined the charm. It glinted in the morning light. She could barely make out an animal of some sort. "It's a badger," said Becky. "That's the Hufflepuff crest." Holly looked at the tiny animal carefully. A gift from a friend. A real friend. She hadn't had a real friend since Jessica. She hadn't dared. A warm feeling spread throughout Holly's body. "Thank you," said Holly. "Thank you very much." And she hugged Becky back. Becky." "Yes?" "What time is it?" "I don't know. Morning. Time for school, I think. Maybe we'd better get ready for class. Come on. I can't wait to show the others my new wand." Becky dug into her dresser for some clothes for the day. "You want to wear your robes, too," she added while swiftly dressing. "Hurry up." Holly sighed and dragged herself out of bed. Reluctantly she dressed, pulling a black school robe over everything. Becky had already begun undoing her braids. "Can you help me with my hair?" she asked, brushing it out quickly. Becky parted her hair again, and Holly started braiding one side, while Becky did the other. When they had finished, Holly brushed out her own blonde hair and stared glumly at her school supplies. This was not a day she was looking forward to. It was her first day of class, not her 6th like everyone else. She would be facing all the teachers and classmates for the first time. Becky, sensing her reluctance, leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry, it'll be okay. I'll be there with you. We'll all be there. All us first years have class together, so you won't be alone." The common room had a huge box of Bertie bought treat assortment, sitting on a table placed in front of the fireplace. There were cauldron cakes and pumpkin pasties and every flavor beans and chocolate frogs and licorice spiders, strawberry tarts, treacle pies, and all sorts of other sweets. Above the box floated the words, "Thank you," in big pink letters made of smoke. "I got the pink letters from Weasley's Jokes shop," said Becky proudly. "They are actually made of smoke and float away after a day. Aren't they nice?" Mark joined the two as they walked down to breakfast. Holly, with Sasha on her shoulder, was carrying her cauldron and all her basic potion ingredients, along with her basic school supplies, so she wouldn't have to make a second trip back to her dorm before class. Her first class was potions, down in the dungeon. "So," said Mark, "how was riding a motorcycle?" "Wonderful," replied Becky excitedly. She turned and punched Holly gently in the arm. "You didn't tell me it flew." Holly smiled. "I figured by the time you found out it would be too late to back out." "That's true," agreed Becky. "I would have jumped right out when I realized the bike was going up in the air, except we were too high up, and I was afraid of hurting myself. After a while it got really fun, though. Too bad I couldn't see much because it was night." "So, what took you so long?" asked Mark. "We figured you'd be back by dinner or so." "Well, we couldn't leave until after dark," explained Becky. "Motorcycles aren't supposed to fly, you know." "What'd you do all day?" asked Holly curiously. "First off," began Becky, "we landed right as the merchants were taking out all their wares. Hagrid marched me straight down to Ollivander's for my wand. Mr. Ollivander practically grabbed my wand out of my hand as soon as he saw it. He kept on muttering how it was criminal for a street vendor to sell a wand like that to a student. Look at my new one." Becky drew out her new one proudly. "Ash and unicorn hair. Isn't it a beauty?" "Yeah," said Mark admiringly. "So what else did you do?" asked Holly. "After I got my wand, we went over to the Leaky Cauldron. It looked like a dirty old pub, but actually it's an inn and serves food and everything. We got breakfast there. They have the best ham and eggs ever. Then Hagrid took me over to the Wizard Film Theater. They were showing the latest Quidditch World Cup. I've never seen a Quidditch match before. It was awesome. Wizard Theater is nothing like the regular stuff." "It's way better than 3D, Becky told Holly. "It's like you're actually at the match. We had seats and cheered with the rest of the crowd. We ate self-popping popcorn that popped and buttered itself right in front of us, and the hot dogs we ordered flew out of the vendor's hand into ours. The Quidditch players zoomed around us and over us wherever the balls took them. I could feel the wind as they passed by. I don't know how they managed to stay on those skinny broomsticks. It was a terrific game," Becky continued, "except when that kid sitting next to us ate too much and barfed all over us. And then some guy above spilled his self-popping popcorn over us and it kept on popping. But otherwise, it was fantastic." "So, who won the game?" asked Mark. "I don't know," replied Becky without interest. "The players wearing the orange cloaks, I think. At least the crowd went wild when that guy caught that tiny ball. I didn't even see it." "They play Quidditch at Hogwarts, too," said Holly. "Do they?" said Becky excitedly. "Terrific. I can't wait to watch a game. Anyway, the game took pretty much the whole day. By the way, Hagrid's invited us over for tea Thursday after broomstick flying practice to find out how my new wand is working. I said yes for both of us. I hope you don't mind. Hagrid looks really scary, but he's awfully nice." Becky paused to take a breath, then she continued her narrative. "When the game was over, we stopped at Bertie Bott's candy store for a while. Hagrid treated me to some ice cream there. I had Rocky Road ice cream." Becky lowered her voice so no one else could overhear her. "Don't ever order Rocky Road ice cream. I think they put real rocks in it, and the brown stuff smelled a lot like dirt and asphalt. Hagrid finished mine after I told him I was too full of popcorn to eat it. He really liked it." Becky raised her voice again and continued her story. "Next, we stopped by Weasley's Joke Shop to look around. By the time we got out, the sun had gone down and the people were closing up their shops. So we went back to the Leaky Cauldron to have dinner while we waited for it to get dark. It was positively the best day ever. By then the three had reached the Great Hall. They entered and sat down at the Hufflepuff table for breakfast.